The mysterious signal. The year was 2346, and humanity had long been at war with the Galactic Coalition. Tensions had risen between Earth and the alien factions that ruled the galaxy, and Earth's fleets were scattered across the stars, defending their borders. But none of the battles had prepared them for what was about to come. Captain Sarah Connor stood at the bridge of the Endeavor, watching the flickering stars on the view screen. It was a quiet day, too quiet. The ship was on routine patrol in the deep space sector, far away from the ongoing galactic conflicts. Sarah leaned forward, tapping her fingers on the console in front of her. She had a gut feeling that something was wrong. Suddenly, a soft beep echoed through the bridge, breaking. A silence. A strange signal had been detected, weak, faint, and coming from the uncharted sector known as Vestan Reach. It wasn't an ordinary transmission. Sarah could feel it in her bones. This was different, important. It wasn't like any distress, call, or friendly communication that Earth had sent out before. This was alien, old, and powerful. The signal was encrypted, layered in mystery. Sarah's first instinct was to ignore it. It was probably a glitch in the system, just a fluke that would disappear as quickly as it came. But something about it lingered, tugging at her mind. She motioned for her communications officer, Lieutenant Mark Sutherland, to analyze the signal. "Can you make anything of it, Lieutenant?" Sarah asked, her voice steady but filled with curiosity. Mark adjusted his glasses and frowned as he worked. "It's not like anything we've encountered, Captain. The signal seems ... ancient. It's been bouncing off different systems, trying to break through, but no one's noticed it before now." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "What kind of encryption are we dealing with?" "Complex," Mark replied, glancing at the screen. "It's a multi-layered code, Captain. The frequency is changing every few seconds, almost like it's trying to hide itself." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a simple transmission. It was purposeful. It was deliberate. And it was calling out. "To them. We need to trace it," Sarah said, her voice firm with determination. "Plot a course to Vestan Reach. Full speed ahead." The crew worked quickly, setting the coordinates for the unknown sector. The Endeavor was a massive warship, built for deep space combat, and it had the power to reach any corner of the galaxy in a matter of weeks. Yet even with its strength, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was unlike any other. As they traveled closer to Vestan Reach, the signal grew stronger. It was no longer just a faint sound, but a constant hum, echoing through the ship's systems. The closer they got, the more erratic their sensors became. They were running into interference, strange anomalies in the space around them, like the universe itself was pushing back against their arrival. It was as though some force was trying to prevent them from getting closer. "Captain, we're entering the Vestan Reach sector," Mark announced, his voice filled with caution. "There's a lot of interference in the area. Our systems are glitching." Sarah stood from her chair, looking out the viewport. The stars ahead were blurred, like smeared paint on a canvas. Space itself seemed to warp, creating a distortion in the fabric of reality. She couldn't understand it, but she knew it wasn't natural. Something was wrong. They were not alone. "Prepare for anything," Sarah ordered, her voice tight. "I don't. Trust this. We need to be ready for whatever's out there." Just then, the signal intensified, flooding the ship's communication systems. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a language, a pattern emerging from the chaos. There was a rhythm to it, as if someone or something was trying to speak to them. "Captain, I think I can almost understand it," Mark said, his hands trembling as he worked. "It's repeating a sequence. It says, the ones who come will awaken the past." The words sent a shock through Sarah. Who could it be? Who was sending this message, and why now? What past was it referring to? "Captain, "You're not going to like this," Mark continued, his voice barely a whisper. "There's something else in the data. Something ... hidden deep inside the signal. Its coordinates. The signal is leading us to a place. It's a station right in the heart of Vestan Reach." Sarah's heart pounded. She had heard rumors about Vestan Reach, a place no one had ever dared to explore. It was known for its strange, unexplained phenomena. Some even called it the forbidden zone of the galaxy. The thought of a station, abandoned and forgotten for who knows how long, sent a wave of unease through her. "We're going," Sarah declared, more to herself than to the crew. "Plot a course. We're going to see what's waiting for us." As the Endeavour moved closer to the coordinates, the ship's systems began to malfunction further. Lights flickered, and strange whispers seemed to echo through the walls. It was as if the station had reached out to them, pulling them in. The air felt thick with tension, and Sarah couldn't help but feel the weight of the unknown bearing. "Down on them, Captain," Mark said, his voice strained. "There's something on the scanner. It's huge, and it's right in our path." For the first time, Sarah felt fear creeping into her thoughts. What was out there, waiting for them? "We're going to find out," she replied, her voice steady. They were heading straight into the unknown, and whatever lay ahead would define humanity's future. Asterisk, a terrifying discovery, as the Endeavour sliced. Through the darkness of Vestan Reach, the strange signal grew louder, more insistent. The ship's sensors continued to flicker, struggling to keep up with the growing interference. The crew worked in a tense silence, each person aware that they were heading into uncharted territory. The deeper they traveled, the more the feeling of dread settled over the bridge. It was as if they were being watched, observed by unseen eyes. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," Mark said, his voice shaky. "I'm reading something massive ahead. It's unlike anything I've ever seen." Sarah nodded, her grip tightening on the console. The lights in the room dimmed, flickering in rhythm with the signal. She had to keep her focus. The crew was relying on her to lead them through this, whatever it was. And yet, the unease gnawing at her wouldn't go away. Every instinct screamed that this was a mistake, that they shouldn't be here, but it was too late to turn back now. "Bring us in slow," Sarah ordered. "Let's approach cautiously." As the ship inched closer to the source of the signal, Sarah saw it on the view screen. At first, it seemed like a small, unremarkable station, just another piece of abandoned technology lost in space. But as the Endeavour drew closer, the full scale of it became clear. The station was enormous, covered in jagged metal and strange, organic-looking growths. It didn't look like anything from the Galactic Coalition, or any species that Earth had ever encountered. The station seemed alive, as if it had a pulse of its own. "What is that thing?" Lieutenant Sutherland muttered, his voice filled with awe and fear. "It's not on any of our maps," Sarah said, her voice tight. "But it's old, older than anything we've ever seen." The closer they got, the more the station seemed to distort in ways that didn't make sense. It was as though it wasn't fully part of the reality they knew, like a tear in the fabric of space-time itself. The walls of the station warped in, strange angles, twisting in impossible shapes. Nothing about it was right. The Endeavour's hull groaned as they drifted closer, the ship's system struggling against the growing interference. "Captain, the signal's getting stronger," Mark said, his voice urgent. "It's coming from deep inside the station. We have to investigate." Sarah looked at the station, the cold, dark mass looming in front of them. She knew that venturing inside was a dangerous risk, but it was their only option. "Prepare the away team," she ordered. "We're going in." A small group of officers suited up, preparing to board the station. Sarah's stomach churned with nerves, but she kept her face neutral. She couldn't let the crew see her fear. She led them to the airlock, her boots echoing in the quiet hallways of the ship. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone knew that this mission was unlike any other they had undertaken. As the airlock opened, the team stepped onto the station, the door sliding shut behind them with a loud clang. The first thing they noticed was the eerie silence. It was as if the station itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. There were no signs of life, no movement. Just the faint hum of the signal that seemed to be everywhere, seeping into their very bones. The walls of the station were lined with strange, pulsating growths, organic tendrils that seemed to move in slow, rhythmic patterns. Sarah shuddered. It was nothing like the sterile, mechanical stations they were used to. This felt alien, in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Captain, look at this," Lieutenant Sutherland called out. He was standing in front of what appeared to be a door, covered in strange symbols. The symbols glowed faintly in the dim light of the station, shifting as though they were alive. Sarah stepped forward, her hand instinctively reaching for the symbol. She traced one of the glowing patterns with her fingers. The moment she made contact, the door shuddered and opened, revealing a dark, narrow hallway leading deeper into the station. "We go in," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the terror building. "Inside her, stick together. We don't know what's waiting for us." The team moved forward, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air was thick, heavy, and cold, with a strange metallic taste that clung to their tongues. As they ventured deeper into the station, Sarah felt a growing sense of unease. The walls seemed to close in around them, and the whispers of the signal grew louder, more urgent. It was almost as if the station itself was calling out to them, beckoning them further. Then, at the end of the corridor, they saw it. A massive chamber, unlike anything they had ever encountered. The room was enormous, stretching out beyond the limits of their vision. In the center of the room stood a large glowing object, a sphere, pulsing with light. It was surrounded by intricate machinery, wires, and cables that seemed to feed into the object, as if it were the heart of the station itself. The moment they stepped into the room, the signal stopped. The hum that had been filling the air vanished, leaving behind an unnatural stillness. Sarah's heart raced. She approached the sphere slowly, her mind racing. What was it? What kind of technology was this? Just then, a low rumble echoed through the chamber, followed by a deafening roar. The walls of the station trembled, and the lights flickered. Something inside the sphere began to stir, as if waking from a long slumber. "Get back!" Sarah shouted, but it was too late. The sphere burst to life, sending out a shockwave of energy that knocked the team off their feet. In that moment, Sarah realized that they had unleashed something far beyond their understanding, and the true danger of Vestan Reach had only just begun. A galaxy on the brink, the shockwave from the sphere sent a ripple through the station, leaving Sarah and her crew gasping for breath. The blinding flash of light that erupted from the object slowly faded, leaving behind an eerie silence. The room was plunged into darkness for a brief moment, the lights flickering back to life in an uneven, almost frantic rhythm. It was as if the station itself was struggling to survive. "Is everyone all right?" Sarah called out, her voice strained as she pushed herself up from the cold metal floor. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, the fear she had pushed aside, suddenly flooding back. She didn't know what had just happened, but she could feel it. Whatever that sphere was, it had changed everything. "We're good, Captain," Mark answered, though his voice sounded unsure. "But something's not right. That energy, it's affecting our systems. We're losing power." Sarah quickly checked her communicator, and sure enough, the Endeavor's systems were flickering in and out, as if they were being drained by the mysterious energy source in the station. It was the signal no longer faint, but now amplified beyond anything they had ever experienced. The station was alive, pulsing with power, but the force it exerted on everything around it was becoming too much to handle. "We need to get back to the ship," Sarah said, her voice growing urgent. She glanced around the chamber, at the eerie glow of the sphere in the center. It was no longer just an object. It had become a beacon, a siren call to something far greater than they could understand. The crew began to move, but as they reached the door, it slammed shut with a deafening noise. A cold mechanical voice echoed through the chamber, seeming to come from nowhere, vibrating in their very bones. "You have awakened the sleeping power," the voice said, calm yet filled with warning. "Now you will face the consequences." Fear struck Sarah like a physical blow. She had expected something to happen, but not this voice, this presence. It felt ancient, almost otherworldly. She took a deep breath and motioned for her. Team to stay calm. They had to think, had to plan. There was no escape from the station, not until they figured out what had just been unleashed. "Captain," Mark said quietly, his eyes scanning the darkened walls, "I don't think we're alone anymore." Sarah turned, instinctively reaching for her blaster, though she knew it wouldn't be enough. The walls of the station shifted, their shapes contorting in impossible angles, as if the very fabric of space within it was beginning to unravel. The entire room seemed to be shifting around them, distorting and warping in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Then the lights flickered again, and when they came back on, something had changed. The station was no longer still. Something was moving within it, beneath it. It was as though the station had come alive, awakening after centuries of dormancy. And that something was coming for them. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and an unnatural hum filled the air, vibrating through their bodies. Sarah turned, her heart racing, but she didn't have to look far to know what was happening. The walls were beginning to crack, and from within the cracks came dark tendrils, like roots of a twisted tree, reaching for the crew. "Run!" Sarah shouted, her voice a mix of fear and command. She didn't need to say it twice. The crew turned and bolted for the corridor, but the door they had come through was no longer an option. The hallway outside had shifted, now an impossible maze of twisting metal and alien architecture. There was no choice now. The only way out was deeper into the station, where the heart of the power lay. Sarah knew they had to find it before whatever was awakening fully emerged, but it was too late. The station was already responding to their presence, and soon, whatever lay dormant for centuries would be unleashed onto the galaxy dot as they ran through the labyrinth. The walls continued to distort, becoming more alive with every step. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and the station seemed to pulse with life, feeding off their every movement. The very air felt thick, heavy with tension and fear. "Captain," Mark shouted from behind. "It's not just the station. There's something else here, something alive." Sarah didn't need to ask what he meant. She could feel it now, a presence dark and hungry, lurking just beyond their reach. The sphere was only the beginning. The station had been built to hold something far more dangerous than they could comprehend. They had unwittingly unleashed a force that would tear through the galaxy, and now there was no going back. "We need to stop it," Sarah sighed, her voice fierce with determination. "Whatever is happening here, we have to shut it down." But as she spoke, the station's hum intensified, and the air crackled with energy. The walls twisted again, opening up into a massive chamber that looked as though it was the center of the station's power. And in the center of it all, the sphere floated, now glowing brighter than ever, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat. A new voice, different from the first, echoed through the chamber, this one deep, resonating with power. "You are too late," it said, The galaxy will tremble, and all will kneel before the awakening. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Asterisk. The betrayal, the eerie voice faded, leaving a deep silence hanging in the air. But it was quickly replaced by a low rumble beneath the station's floor. Sarah's heart pounded, and she motioned for the crew to move quickly. Every instinct in her screamed that they had no time to waste. Whatever this awakening was, it was moving faster than they could comprehend. "We have to get to the control room," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "It's the only way to stop this." The crew began moving again, their steps quick but cautious, their eyes scanning every corner. The station's maze-like corridors twisted around them, making it difficult to tell if they were going in circles or actually advancing toward their destination. The further they traveled, the more the station seemed to close in on them, as though the walls themselves were shifting to trap them inside. "Captain," Mark called out, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "I don't think we're alone." Sarah turned toward him just as one of the shadows in the corner of her vision seemed to move. It was fast, unnaturally fast, and it was not one of the crew members. Before Sarah could react, a figure stepped out of the darkness, blocking their path. It was a humanoid shape, cloaked in a flowing black cloak that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes were glowing faintly, casting an eerie light on its angular face. "We need to stop moving," the figure said in a cold, mechanical voice. Mark stumbled back in surprise, his hand going instinctively to his weapon, but Sarah raised a hand to stop him. This wasn't the enemy they expected. This wasn't the station, or the alien force they had uncovered. This figure was different. It was human, but the face that stared back at her was unfamiliar, and the dark energy that radiated from it was chilling. "I said stop," the figure repeated, its voice more insistent now. It reached out toward Sarah, its hand glowing faintly, with strange energy. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her voice hard, demanding answers. The figure tilted its head, as if considering her question. "I am someone who knows what you have unleashed. Someone who has been waiting for this day." Sarah's pulse quickened as she exchanged a glance with Mark. "What do you mean?" The figure's smile was cold, almost sadistic. "You're not the first to find this station, and you won't be the last. But the truth of it, it's far worse than you can imagine. You were meant to find this place, Captain Connor. It was always going to be you." Before Sarah could react, the figure moved faster than she could follow, appearing in front of her in a blur of shadows. It grabbed her arm with an unnatural force, its grip like iron. "Let go," Sarah hissed, struggling against the grip. The figure's smile faded into something colder, more menacing. "You won't escape what's coming," it said, its voice barely a whisper in her ear. "You've played into our hands. You've triggered the awakening, and now you'll pay for it." Suddenly, the air around them crackled with energy. Sarah could feel the temperature in the hallway plummet, her breath coming out in visible clouds. The station seemed to come alive again, pulsing with a dark, malevolent force. The sphere that had started it all glowed brighter, its power beginning to radiate out in waves, engulfing everything in its reach. Mark rushed forward, pulling Sarah free from the figure's grasp. The figure didn't even flinch. It stepped back, allowing them to escape, but its eyes, those glowing, menacing eyes, never left them. "Do you think you can stop it?" The figure called after them, its voice following them like a shadow. "It's too late for that. You've already chosen." The crew quickly regrouped, adrenaline surging through their veins. They had no time to lose. The betrayal was clear now. This figure wasn't just a threat, it was part of something far more sinister. Someone or something had been waiting for them, and now the stakes were higher than ever. "Captain, what do we do?" Mark asked, his voice frantic. "This station is alive. It's feeding on us. And that thing? It knows too much. How can we fight it? Sarah's mind raced. The figure's words echoed in her mind. You've already chosen. What did it mean? Who had this figure been waiting for? And why had they been brought here? We need to get to the control room, Sarah said again, this time with more urgency. It's the only place we can stop this. They began running. Once more, the eerie whispers of the figure still echoing in their minds. But as they rounded a corner, Sarah saw something that stopped her cold. The walls of the station seemed to bend and twist, as if responding to something deeper within. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of their choices. And then, ahead, the lights flickered to reveal something that made her blood run cold. Door one that had not been there before. It was different from the others, its design more complex, its edges glowing with the same unnatural light that had consumed the station. The control room, Sarah muttered under her breath. But she didn't have time to wonder how this door had appeared. She was already moving toward it, knowing that whatever lay beyond it would be the key to their survival, or their destruction as they crossed the threshold. Sarah realized with a sinking feeling that this was the heart of the station. The power that had been unleashed had drawn them here, and now they were in the presence of whatever had been waiting in the shadows all this time. This wasn't just the end of their mission. This was the beginning of something much darker. Asterisk. Humanity's last stand, the door, shut behind them with a final, resounding clang, sealing Sarah and her crew in the heart of the station. The control room was vast larger than any she had imagined. It was like stepping into the core of the station itself, a sprawling chamber filled with alien machinery that hummed with dark energy. The walls were lined with symbols, glowing faintly, their meanings completely beyond their comprehension. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as though the space itself was alive and waiting. "Captain," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible, "this place, it's like a nerve center. I've never seen anything like this. It's not just a station, it's something else." Sarah nodded, scanning the room. There was a large console in the center, its surface pulsating with energy. It was surrounded by numerous terminals, each connected to the glowing symbols on the walls. The center of it all was the sphere they had seen earlier, now suspended in mid-air above the console, its surface shimmering with a strange light. The feeling of dread was almost overwhelming. She could sense it now. Something was watching them. This room was more than just a control hub. It was the heart of something ancient, a force far beyond their understanding. "We need to shut it down," Sarah muttered, though her voice was filled with uncertainty. "Whatever this is, we can't let it spread beyond this station." The team split up, heading toward the terminals. They began to interface with the alien controls, trying to make sense of the foreign technology. But every time they tried to make progress, the symbols flickered and shifted, as though resisting their presence. "Captain," Mark called out from across the room, "this isn't like anything we've ever encountered. The systems are self-repairing. Every time I try to break through, the data just rebuilds itself." Sarah's heart sank. This wasn't just an alien station. It was alive, as if the very systems were conscious, actively defending themselves. And it was clear that whatever force was operating this station had no intention of letting them leave with the knowledge they had uncovered. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook violently, knocking Sarah off her feet. The lights flickered, and a deafening, low hum began to resonate through the walls. The sphere above the console flared to life, sending out a pulse of energy that sent a shockwave through the room. "What the hell is happening?" Mark shouted, scrambling to his feet. The walls around them began to crack, and the machinery hummed louder. Then, a voice cold, mechanical, and all-encompassing boomed from every corner of the room. "You were not meant to survive," it said, each word vibrating through their bones. "You were never meant to find this place." The power you have awakened is not for your kind. Asterisk, the sphere began to spin, faster and faster, its energy expanding outward. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the walls began to warp, shifting. In response to the rising power, Sarah knew they were running out of time. "Captain," Mark called out, his voice trembling. "The sphere, it's activating something." "The station, it's—" Before he could finish, a loud screech tore through the air, and a massive surge of energy blasted out from the sphere, ripping through the control room. The shockwave sent them all flying across the room, slamming into the walls with bone-crushing force. Sarah's vision blurred, and she struggled to push herself up from the floor, gasping for air. When she finally regained her bearings, she saw it. The station had begun to unfold, massive metal arms extending outward, as if the station itself was awakening from a long slumber. The walls were no longer static. They were moving, shifting, and reconfiguring themselves into an entirely new form. Is this the station fighting back?" Lieutenant Sutherland asked, his voice strained. "It's worse than that," Sarah replied, her voice hoarse. "This is no station. It's a weapon. We've activated a weapon, and now it's responding. Whatever it was designed to do, it's coming to life." The door behind them slammed shut, trapping them inside. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the room began to spin as the machinery hummed louder. Sarah's head spun with the realization. Whatever they had found here, whatever this weapon was, it had been waiting for the right moment to awaken. And now that moment had come. "We need to shut it down," Sarah repeated, her voice filled with desperation. "We have to find a way to stop it before it tears through the galaxy." Mark looked at her, his face pale with fear. "But how?" "The systems are too advanced. We don't even know what we're dealing with." A flicker of something caught Sarah's eye, a terminal on the far side of the room, its screen flickering with life. It was weak, barely functioning, but it was their only chance. "Over there," Sarah shouted, pointing toward the terminal. "That's our best shot." The crew rushed toward the terminal, the walls shifting and groaning around them. The station was alive, fighting to stop them, but they couldn't stop now. They had no choice. If they didn't find a way to shut down the weapon, they would be the ones who paid the price. Sarah reached the terminal first, her fingers flying across the keys as she desperately tried to make sense of the alien language. The symbols danced on the screen, flickering, changing, almost mocking her efforts. But Sarah didn't give up. She kept typing, her mind focused on one thing: survival. The station responded with a violent tremor, as if it were fighting back. The terminal screen flickered, and for a brief moment, everything went dark. Then, a strange, cold light filled the room, and the hum of the station's energy reached a deafening crescendo. "Captain, I think we've triggered something," Mark sighed, his voice filled with dread. "This isn't just a shutdown. It's activating something else." Before Sarah could respond, the room erupted into blinding light. Asterisk, the battle for the future. The blinding light engulfed the room, and for a moment, Sarah lost all sense of direction. The noise, the humming, the roaring energy was deafening. Her vision swam as the air seemed to warp, distorting around her like a fevered dream. Every instinct told her to run, to escape, but there was no escape. They had gone too far. The station was no longer just a structure in space. It was a living weapon, and it was now awake. "Captain," Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The station's core, it's shifting." Sarah barely heard him over the overwhelming noise, but she understood the meaning behind his words. The very heart of the station was changing, and it wasn't just the control room. The entire structure was transforming, its shape warping into something darker, something more sinister. The power they had triggered was spreading like a disease, consuming everything in its path. Sarah stumbled to her feet, disoriented but determined. She couldn't let the station win. They had to stop it. They had to shut it down, or the galaxy would fall. Focus. Sarah snapped, her voice cutting through the haze. We have to make it to the core. Now. It's the only way to stop this. The crew, shaken but resolute, followed her as they moved through the shifting halls. The walls of the station seemed to move in waves, bending and twisting in response to the rising power. The lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out toward them. As they moved, Sarah felt a growing pressure in her chest, a weight that grew heavier with every step. The station was alive, and it was fighting back. Each corridor seemed longer, each room more twisted than the last, but they couldn't stop. They couldn't give up. The fate of humanity and the galaxy rested in their hands. Captain, Lieutenant Sutherland called out, his voice tight with fear. We've lost contact with the Endeavor. The energy surge has completely fried our communication systems. We're on our own now. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. They were cut off from help. If they failed, no one would know what had happened to them. The galaxy would be left in the dark, unaware of the catastrophic force that was now being unleashed. We've always been on our own, Sarah said, trying to calm herself. Now we fight. They reached the heart of the station. The central chamber was vast, stretching out before them like the bowels of some ancient creature. In the center of the room was the source of the power, the core. It glowed with a fierce, unnatural light, pulsating with energy that radiated out in waves, bending space itself. The air was thick with static, and the walls seemed to pulse in time with the beating of the core. That's it, Sarah said, her voice low. That's where we have to strike. But as she stepped forward, the floor beneath them began to crack. The core was reacting to their presence. The walls trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Suddenly, the doors slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside. The core flared brighter, and the entire station began to groan as if it were alive, its insides shifting and churning with dark power. The light grew blinding, and Sarah could feel the energy building, reaching a breaking point. The station was no longer just a weapon. It had become a force of nature, and it was intent on destroying them. Mark's voice broke through the chaos. Captain, the core, it's feeding off our energy. The more we resist, the stronger it gets. Sarah turned toward him, her mind racing. We have to overload it. The only way to stop it is to give it everything it wants, then turn it against itself. But as she spoke, the core seemed to sense their intent. The energy levels skyrocketed, and the walls began to crack and splinter. The station was reacting violently, its systems pushing back against their plan. Do it, Sarah shouted. We don't have a choice. Mark quickly moved to the nearest terminal, frantically typing commands into the alien interface. But just as he made progress, a dark figure stepped out from the shadows, its glowing eyes fixated on them. You think you can control it? The figure said, its voice a low, mocking tone. It was the same figure they had encountered earlier, the one that had betrayed them. You, Sarah said, her heart pounding in fury. You're the one who's been behind this. The figure smiled, its expression cruel. You were never meant to succeed. You were meant to open the path for the true masters. This station is merely the first step. You are nothing more than pawns in a much larger game. The figure's words struck Sarah like a blow. They had been played. This wasn't just about the station or the alien technology. There was something much bigger behind it, something far more dangerous. And they had unknowingly triggered it. We can still stop this, Sarah shouted, ignoring the figure's taunts. She turned back to Mark. We're not finished yet. We can turn the tide. With a final desperate push, Mark entered the final command. The energy in the room intensified, and the core began to hum louder. The walls shook violently, and Sarah braced herself against the force. The core exploded with a burst of light so bright it blinded them all. The power surged outward, racing through the station, tearing it apart from the inside. The walls buckled and twisted, collapsing under the weight of the unleashed energy. The figure screamed, but it was drowned out by the roar of the collapsing station. The lights flickered one last time, and then silence. For a long moment, Sarah didn't move. She couldn't tell if she was alive or dead. The station was gone, its power spent, its dark force neutralized. But at what cost? Slowly, Sarah pushed herself up. The station's once glowing core was now a twisted ruin, its energy completely drained. The darkness in the room seemed to recede, but it left behind a lingering sense of foreboding. "Is it over?" Mark asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Sarah looked around at the wreckage, the smoldering ruins of the station. "It's over for now, but we've just scratched the surface. Whatever was behind this, it's still out there, and we've just become a part of it." Humanity's awakening, the remnants of the station drifted slowly into the cold expanse of space, a broken monument to the power that had once lived within its walls. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Endeavor, staring out at the wreckage, the dim glow of the distant stars reflecting off the viewport. The battle was over, but the victory felt hollow. The danger they had faced was just one small part of something far larger and far more dangerous. "Captain, we've scanned the wreckage." Mark's voice broke through the silence. "It's gone. Whatever powered that station, whatever. Dark force was inside. It's no longer active. But ... Sarah turned to face him, her brow furrowed. "But what?" Mark hesitated before speaking. "But the data we've recovered from the station. It's unlike anything we've seen before. This was only one part of a much larger network. The signal we followed? It's part of a web, Captain. A web that stretches across the galaxy." The realization hit her like a cold wave. The station, the signal, the betrayal, it had all been a part of something far more insidious. This was not an isolated incident. They had only scratched the surface of an ancient network that spanned the stars. "We didn't stop it," Sarah muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "We just slowed it down," Mark nodded grimly. "That's what I'm afraid of." A thought hung heavily in the air between them. Earth had been blindsided, caught in the middle of a game they didn't understand. But now, Sarah realized, they were part of something larger than their petty wars with the Galactic Coalition. They had unwittingly awoken an ancient force that had been lying in wait for millennia, and they had just made it their enemy. "We need to report this to Earth," Sarah said, her voice firm, though she felt a weight in her chest. "We have to warn them before it's too late." But as she spoke, a new voice interrupted her thoughts, one that sent a chill running down her spine. "You're already too late," the voice said, smooth and cold, resonating through the speakers of the Endeavor. "You've played your part. You've unleashed the first wave of the awakening." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. That voice, it was the same one they had heard in the station. The figure. The betrayer. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, gripping the edge of the console. "What do you want?" The voice chuckled, its tone mocking. "I've wanted nothing from you, Captain. You have only given me what I desired. You've opened the door to the power of the ancients, and now there is no going back. The awakening has begun." The screen in front of Sarah flickered to life, revealing a holographic projection of the same figure they had encountered inside the station. This time, though, the figure was not in the shadows. It stood in full view, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light, and its face twisted into a smile. "You ... You work for them," Sarah said, her voice tight with disbelief. "You're a part of this." The figure inclined its head. "Yes, I am a servant of the ancients. And you, Captain Connor, have unwittingly become my ally, or perhaps my pawn. The weight of those words settled over Sarah like a storm. She had never been a pawn in anyone's game until now, and the implications were horrifying. The ancients, whoever they were, whatever they had planned, Earth was now in the crosshairs. "You're not going to win," Sarah said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. "You may have won today, but humanity will fight. We'll never bow to you." The figure's smile grew wider, more sinister. "You misunderstand, Captain. Humanity's fate was never in your hands. It was always mine to decide. You are too small to stand in the way of what is coming." Sarah clenched her fists, anger flooding through her veins. "You can't control us. We're more than your pawn. We're humanity." The figure's expression faltered for a brief moment, and then it laughed, an eerie, hollow laugh that filled the room. "We shall see," it said. "We shall see how much humanity can resist when it faces the full might of the ancients. Your resistance ... it amuses me. But in the end, it won't matter. The web has already been cast. Your species will fall in line, or it will burn." With that, the figure's image disappeared, leaving Sarah and the crew in stunned silence. Lights on the Endeavour flickered once more, and the ship's systems hummed with an unfamiliar energy. The transmission had ended, but the weight of the threat still lingered in the air. Sarah stood there for a long moment, trying to process everything that had just happened. "Captain?" Mark's voice broke the silence. "What do we do now?" Sarah turned to face him, her resolve heartening. She had led them this far, and now she had to lead them through the darkest days humanity had ever known. They had been caught in a web. Yes, but they weren't helpless. "Not yet. We fight," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We fight for Earth, and we fight for the future. The ancients may think they control us, but they're wrong. We're going to take the fight to them, and we'll never give up." She turned back to the viewport, staring at the stars. The galaxy felt vast and terrifying, but Sarah had always believed in humanity's strength. She still did. It was time to awaken something else, something far more powerful than anything the ancients could imagine. Asterisk.